Hi there and welcome to this week's edition of Northwest Newsweek. Communities in Northern Ontario are weighing in on the plan to create 1 or 2 new ridings in the far north for the upcoming provincial election. The boundaries of Kenora Rainy River and Timmins James Bay will be changing as a result, with 5 options on the table. Adam Riley attended the public consultation in Sioux Lookout on Tuesday and files this report.
The next provincial election is just a year away, and as candidates ready themselves for a major showdown, residents in some sections of Northern Ontario will be checking to see what riding they'll be living in. 2 years ago, the province amended the Representation Act to increase the number of northern ridings by a maximum of 2. That led to the creation of the Far North Electoral Boundaries Commission, overseen by Justice Joyce Pelletier. She says the response to the commission has been varied, but all the comments are important.
We are seeing more response from those who are living in the far north of the electoral districts or along the potential boundary lines. Sioux Lookout being one, Lac Seul being another. And then on the Timmins side, the communities along the Highway 11 corridor and the far north.
This is the makeup of the current ridings: Kenora Rainy River and Timmins James Bay. So far, there are 5 suggestions as to how the ridings will be reorganized. 2 of the plans will see the creation of 2 new ridings, and 3 will result in 1. On Tuesday, 15 residents from the region came out to the session held in Sioux Lookout. Most notably was Kenora Rainy River MPP Sarah Campbell. Her riding will drastically shrink as a result of any of the current suggestions. She says she's all in favor of the redistribution.
It's actually something that I mentioned to the Chief Electoral Officer after the last election. It doesn't take very long to realize that there's a democratic deficit that exists in Kenora Rainy River, and I really believe that we need to increase Indigenous representation in the Ontario Legislature, and I think this is one of the best ways.
The Commission will complete its consultation tour by the beginning of next month and will be returning to Kenora for a second meeting in hopes of receiving more feedback from the First Nations communities in that area.
We started out the consultation with going to the NAN Chief Spring Assembly in Timmins in early May and received a good reception there. We then went and did the same thing with the Grand Council Treaty Number 3, because both of those First Nation provincial territorial organizations are impacted by this, or potentially impacted by this.
At Sioux Lookout session, one of the key points residents stressed to the Commission was the need to take population density out of the equation, as well as to guarantee there be representation of the First Nation communities in the north. Adam Riley, TBT News.
A new conservation area near the U.S. border is creating tax trouble for the municipal council in Nebing. Nature reserves are usually given exemptions from property taxes, a concern for councils with already small tax bases. At this week's NOMA meeting, the regional politicians got an update from Nebing on the issue and also voiced their thoughts on new ridings for the far north at Queen's Park. Xiao Li has more.
It was a cross-border partnership to save 1,100 hectares of pristine Lake Superior shoreline. But the March purchase of land near Big Trout Bay by the Nature Conservancy of Canada has become a headache for Nebing municipality, where the land sits.
The Nature Conservancy is paying the tax. It's approximately $4,000 on 2,500 acres, so basically about $1.25 an acre. But down the road, a lot of the conservation groups, once the studies are completed to determine that it is conservation land, then apply for tax-exempt status on that land.
Nebing Councillor Erwin Butekhofer was at this NOMA meeting talking about getting fair compensation for tax-exempt conservation land. Butekhofer says the province is consulting Nebing over programs like the Conservation Land Tax Incentive Program, which reduces property taxes for participating homeowners. But Butekhofer says they're doing so while simultaneously soliciting for tax incentive applications in Nebing. Butekhofer says these exemptions especially hurt towns which have small tax bases to begin with.
Our calculations through our admin staff has shown that for every $1,000 in tax that we lose, OMPF comes back with $250 in compensation. So that's not compensation.
Meanwhile, NOMA also settled on a position on the issue of new seats at Queen's Park for the North. The Far North Electoral Boundaries Commission has produced several sample maps of what a new riding map in the region could look like. After some discussion, NOMA endorsed a proposed riding map that would keep the Northwest mostly as is, but with a new seat added in the southern part of Kenora Rainy River. Other options included creating a new mega riding by merging the far north sections of the Kenora and Timmins seats, something NOMA has ruled out as unrealistic.
The other samples, 3, 4, and 5, would include basically the whole of Northern Ontario, which is the Phonom and NOMA areas, and all the First Nations to the north, up to James Bay and Hudson Bay, as one huge riding. It would be the size of Europe, basically, and have one representative.
NOMA's position will be sent to the province as well as the Federation of Northern Ontario Municipalities. Xiaoli Li, TBT News.
Debate around Ontario's upcoming minimum wage hike has reached the NOMA Board of Directors, who have voiced a range of thoughts on its impact on rural Ontario. Premier Kathleen Wynne unveiled plans in May to raise Ontario's minimum wage to $15 an hour by January 2019. The government's plan also includes making it easier for people to join unions and increasing annual paid vacations. However, at a recent NOMA board meeting, representatives from across the Northwest were split on the issue. Many mayors said the change would hurt smaller communities, many of whom rely on a handful of small businesses for employment. But others said paying workers more means they'll spend more locally as well.
I look at the opportunity for individuals working at that lower pay scale to have an opportunity to buy more product, but have a quality of life, affordable lifestyle. But I also look at the other side of the business side, and I talk to my business owners in my community, and they feel frustrated that the government's just going ahead without any input from them.
We only have 8, 10 businesses in the community, which all rely on generally part-time help and students, and so it's going to be a challenge for them to try to fit that into a budget and without increasing costs to the public.
NOMA reps also say raising the student minimum wage could mean some municipalities will scale back summer student job programs. A former member of Parliament is looking to represent Thunder Bay at the provincial level. John Rafferty says rising hydro costs convinced him to seek a seat at Queen's Park. Rafferty was selected Monday night as the official NDP candidate for Thunder Bay Atikokan in next year's provincial election.
What Kathleen Wynne is doing is wrong. And I'm running in this election to stop the growing unfairness, the unaffordability, the inequality.
Rafferty served as the MP for Thunder Bay Rainy River from 2008 until 2015. He credits his return to politics to Premier Kathleen Wynne and says there's a pattern emerging and a real dislike with what her Liberal government is doing to the province, especially when it comes to hydro and their efforts to privatize it.
2005 was on the table, 2007 was on the table, and it's still on the table. And so we as the NDP have not been successful in putting a halt to privatization. We're determined to do so, and that's why we keep up the fight. We know how dangerous Kathleen Wynne and hydro, that combination, is.
Rafferty says the solution is in Quebec and Manitoba, which have surplus power. Rafferty will be facing longtime Liberal MPP and Cabinet Minister Bill Morrow, who narrowly defeated Rafferty in the 2007 election. The next election is scheduled for June 2018, and the Conservatives, Green Party, and Northern Ontario Party have yet to name candidates in the riding. The investigation of an assault complaint in Ignace has led to the arrest of a man wanted on a Canada-wide warrant. OPP officers were calling to a home in the community Tuesday afternoon and recognized one of the occupants as a man wanted in Calgary. 28-year-old William Kincaid Miller was being sought because he may have information on a May 25th double homicide. He was taken into custody and will be transported back to Calgary. The Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry made a stop in Thunder Bay Friday to make an announcement that can help the environment in a big way. St. Elizabeth's School received a visit from Minister Catherine McGarry. She says the province has launched a program that will see 50 million trees planted between now and the year 2025. McGarry, Minister Bill Morrow, and 5 students from St. Elizabeth planted a tree in front of the school as part of the initiative. McGarry says in honor of celebrating Canada's 150th birthday, they've already launched the Greenleaf Challenge to encourage residents to plant a tree.
We are looking to increase, instead of 3 million trees planted annually, to 6 million trees. So we've challenged every person, whether they can plant a tree in their yard or their schoolyard, or to purchase a tree that can be planted by somebody else.
It was fun helping the environment. and planting a tree and watering it. Because they help the environment, they give food to the earth, they make apples, they make oranges.
St. Elizabeth's Parent Council raised $10,000 through various fundraising efforts to have 12 trees installed within the playground. And they plan on having 40 more trees planted within the next 5 years. This week, OPP and Marathon dealt with a pair of motor vehicle collisions that resulted in serious injuries. The first occurred just after 2 o'clock Thursday morning on Highway 17, about 60 kilometers east of Marathon, when a tractor-trailer unit came into collision with a car. The driver of the car had to be extricated from the vehicle by Marathon fire crews. The 34-year-old Edmonton man was transported to hospital in critical condition. The driver of the transport and a passenger were treated at the scene for minor injuries. 6 hours later, a single tractor-trailer left the roadway on Highway 17 at Cigar Lake near the Hemlo mine, rolling upside down into a rock cut. Both the driver and passenger had to be extricated by fire crews and were taken to hospital with serious injuries. Both incidents remain under investigation. The Ontario government is attempting to extend contracts for one of its largest unions for the next 4 years. The current contract for OPSEU is set to expire on December 31st. The union represents 36,000 public employees across the province, and the contract offer includes a wage increase of 7.5% over 4 years, as well as other improvements. Recent amendments to the Crown Employees Collective Bargaining Act gives OPSEU's correctional bargaining unit the right to negotiate a separate deal. And corrections officers here in Thunder Bay say the offer isn't even worthy of consideration. Bargaining for a new collective agreement was expected to begin this fall, but instead the province delivered an offer. Employees would see a wage increase of 1.5% this July and then a 1% increase every 6 months for the entirety of the 4-year contract. But OPSEU Local 708 President and Correctional Officer Sean Bradshaw says the offer does nothing to address any of the issues.
And illnesses that arise. It's much less money than we've been seeking, and not that it's only the money parts. It will stop us from bargaining our own pensions. It offers zero improvements on any benefits. We'll still remain last in Canada in pensions, last in Canada in shift premiums, last in Canada in many other facets of our job. We won't have CTO, which is another thing that every other province has, including federal institutions.
We're going to allow the employees the membership to have a vote on this, and we'll leave it up to them whether they think it's a good deal or it's not a good deal.
Bradshaw says the corrections unit is recommending a 100% rejection of this offer, and he predicts the refusal to be in the high 90s across the province. OPSEU members are set to vote June 20th to the 22nd. Well, don't go anywhere, because coming up after the break, rainbows fly high at Dryden's first ever Pride Parade. Well, June is Pride Month in communities across the country, but in 2017, it's something special for the LGBTQ residents in Dryden, and it's the first time the community held its first ever Pride event. Christina Jung has more.
For the first time in Dryden's 107-year history, the rainbow flag that represents members of the LGBTQ community flew over the city of 8,000. Last Saturday, over 150 people came out to celebrate Pride Weekend at City Hall. Representatives from all levels of government came out, including MPP Sarah Campbell and MP Bob Nault.
This is a big day for Dryden, as was the very first one that I went to in Kenora. I think they're awesome because it gives the community the opportunity to show who they are, what they believe in, that we're a society that's open, democratic. I'm honored to be here because I think every community should have a small Pride parade.
Organizer Mary Thibault says she and the rest of the organizing committee were blown away by the amount of support offered by the community in preparation for the event.
The business owners who have, bought into this and accepted and come to us and offered us things, and the people who've come forward and said, what can I do? What can I give? How can I help? And not just within Dryden, but from the entirety of Northern Ontario.
After the rally and flag raising at City Hall, attendees marched through the downtown core and along the waterfront for a party at Cooper's Park. It was there attendees heard from Shelley Durant about her transgender son, Evan.
My advice to parents of an LGBTQ2+ child is to always try to remember that this is still the child, the soul you've been given and have loved from day one.
Evan, who now lives in Winnipeg, came out as gay 6 years ago and has been out as transgender for 3 years. He says he has never been to a Pride parade and is glad that Dryden is his first.
It's great. I never really thought it would happen, especially growing up here. Gay rights or LGBT stuff isn't really talked about that much, but it's great to see, and there's been a great turnout, so I'm really happily surprised.
Organizers have already taken the steps to get ready for next year's Pride events by creating the Rainbow Alliance Dryden page on Facebook to provide support and information to the LGBTQ community. Christina Jung, TBT News.
With only a year left before the current municipal councils dissolve for the 2018 elections, Dryden is looking to fill a vacancy in its council chambers. Daryl Skinner is stepping down from his council seat effective July 19th. Skinner ran in the 2014 municipal election but was unsuccessful in his bid. However, 1 year later, Ken Moss stepped down from his seat and Skinner was appointed in his place. Council now has until September to find a replacement. After a bit of uncertainty about the future of Kenora's Coast Guard station, the federal government has announced they will not be closing the facility. In a statement this week, Kenora MP Bob Nault announced that the station will continue its operations in Kenora. Lake of the Woods is home to 16,000 islands, hundreds of cottages, and plays host to thousands of tourists every summer. The Coast Guard maintains buoys and provides rescue operations on the lake, and according to Kenora Mayor Dave Canfield, at times the Lake of the Woods can be treacherous and service provided.
It's a lake that is very unique with almost 16,000 islands, and you figure just the shoals and reefs and stuff in there, you could probably double that again. So it's a very, in a lot of ways, treacherous. If it wasn't marked, navigated, and looked after by the Coast Guard, it could be a fairly dangerous system, and the water level fluctuates up and down. So it's reefs that are here today, are not here today, might be here tomorrow.
Canfield says he had spoken with the Coast Guard about the issues in regard to losing the station and is glad that common sense prevailed in the decision process. The township of Terrace Bay is looking to diversify its economy by expanding further into the tourism market. Last year, the community received $40,000 from Parks Canada to look into developing their waterfront area. Locals and tourists came down to the beach on a regular basis to enjoy views provided by Lake Superior or to just catch a few fish. Expansion plans include bringing electrical and water hookups down to the beach area for campers, construction of a pavilion, and the installation of these kayak docks. Mayor Jody Davis says the studies into the waterfront have taken a bit of time, and now with the various partnerships and an engineering report, they're ready to move into a costing phase.
We've tried to stage it down through the times, and depending on who the partners available are, and to see if we can move forward. Right now, Parks Canada, the Lake Superior National Marine Conservation Area, is moving ahead and becoming more active. So we want to work with them to provide them an opportunity to present their National Marine Conservation Area as well as what Terrace Bay has to offer.
Davis says he hopes to have all the funding in place to move ahead by 2019. Well, coming up next, animals from remote First Nations are going to find their forever homes. Stay tuned. Well, spay and neutering is a huge help when it comes to controlling pet populations in remote First Nations where those services are non-existent. With the help of North Star Air, a group of volunteers from the OSPCA in Southern Ontario made their first trip to North this week, and besides spaying and neutering, they transferred some animals out as well. Louisa Alvarez has the details.
North Star Air has been partnering with the Ontario SPCA over the last 2 years. The nonprofit organization was invited to conduct a spay and neuter clinic in Big Trout Lake. But with the overpopulation of cats and dogs becoming a growing problem, transferring them out was another crucial step in ensuring the welfare of these animals and the community itself.
Some are abused, possibly, but most of them are just free-roaming dogs and nobody owns them. So in the spring and in the fall, they have a tendency to pack up, and that produces a safety issue in the communities.
Since their partnership began, North Star has helped transfer over 140 dogs from northern reserves. But they're taking their involvement one step further and putting their money where their mouth is, donating a little over $30,000 to the program they call a needed service.
Just another way of showing our support for this program and showing our way of assisting the communities that we service that support us up north.
This group of volunteers from Southern Ontario provide their services all over the world, with this trip marking their first in the north. Judy DeSico with the OSPCA says the money will help expand the services to reach even more communities.
It'll be used to help us deliver more services north as far as transferring animals from the north to the south and helping with some of the spay-neuter clinics.
In total, 13 dogs and 5 kitties came from KI First Nation. They're heading over to Peterborough to find their forever homes. Luisa Alvarez, TVT News.
After 4 months of around-the-clock care, the 12 malnourished sled dogs rescued near Long Lac are ready to head to British Columbia for the final chapter of their journey. But in order to get there, the District Humane Society needs your help. Happily jumping and playing around, these 2 sled dogs, along with 10 others, have come a long way since February. Originally rescued from the Greenstone area, Executive Director Cassandra Nordal says these sled dogs were close to death when they first arrived. She contacted a sled dog rehabilitation center in Victoria, BC, which agreed to take the dogs and help them fully recover and find their forever homes. But the dogs need to get there first, and that's where the Humane Society needs the community's help.
So at this point in time, we're asking for any airlines to step up, contact us if you can help in any way, even if you can transfer them a little bit closer to Victoria. We're also asking people if they have air miles. They can be transferred into cash value.
And as an additional way to fundraise, Nordal says they've created new T-shirts with all proceeds going directly towards transporting the sled dogs. And that'll do it for this week's edition of Northwest Newsweek. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next time.